and then, see, this is actually working? Yeah, it is. All right, perfect. So we're going to do the second creation story here. Anybody ever know that, right? You take a realization. Now, we just did the first creation story. Now we're going to look at the second creation story, right? Notice how it starts off here in verse 4. Such is the story of the heavens and the earth at their creation. Right? And it's like, wait a second, I thought we just did that. I thought we just created the heavens and the earth. But yeah, we're going to see God kind of going through another story here. All right? And so what we look at is really this idea that the creation story that we're about to read is not necessarily an entirely new story, but rather a closer look into day 6. All right? So take a look at this. Did you know? Right? And just highlight that there. Right? But it's rather a closer look into day 6 when God created the animals and human beings. Right? So just highlight that for yourselves. Right? This way you know. Right? Because the two will kind of mesh together, but not perfectly also. All right, but not perfect. So let's go ahead and read verse 4. Any volunteers that would like to read for us? Go ahead, Jonathan, nice and loud.
Such is the story of the heavens and the earth at their creation. At the time when the Lord God made the earth and the heavens, while as yet there was no creature on earth and no grass in the field had sprouted. For the Lord God had sent no rain from heaven, and there was no man to till the soil. But a stream was welling up out of the earth and was watering all the surface of the ground. The Lord God formed man out of the clay of the ground and blew into his nostrils the breath of life, and so man became a living being.
Very good, right? So we see this little detail here, right? That God is going to use this stream, right? That's making this like mud, dirt, gesundheit, clay type material, and God is going to go over to the clay and he's going to form this thing that looks like a man, right? Kind of like when you go to the beach and you build a sandcastle out of the sand, or you ever see like those sand sculptures where it's like this guy makes an alligator looking thing in the sand? You ever see these things? I think they're fantastic, right? And that's what God kind of does with the clay. And then what does he do? He breathes into his nostrils and the man becomes a living being, right? God gives him that breath of life. Anybody know what day of the church year we remember our creation? We remember that the fact that we are dust, right? That we were created out of dust. There you go. Now all the hands come out, and to dust we shall return. Ash Wednesday. Very good. So highlight verse 7 for me, right? And just put this down. That Ash Wednesday, we are reminded of our creation, right? You go to church, and the priest is going to take the ashes from the palm from last year's Palm Sunday, and he's going to put it on your forehead in the sign of the cross, and he's going to say, remember you are dirt, or you remember you are dust, and to dust you shall return, right? It's kind of this, important aspect for us to remember our mortality. Remember that we are not who? We are not God, right? And that's an important part here, right? That we are not God. We like to think we're God sometimes. Right? We like to think that we get to do whatever we want, but we're not God, right? And so that's the idea behind this Ash Wednesday, right? And so there, right? Everybody's got that note, right? Very good. So we see man, right? Do we see the woman yet?
No.
She's not here, right? Because what God is going to do is God is now going to start to create animals in search for this perfect companion, this perfect partner, this perfect equal for the man. All right? So let's go ahead and take a look. Verse 8. Verse 8. Any volunteers? Go ahead.
Then the Lord God planted a garden of Eden in the east, and he had placed there of the man whom he had formed. Out of the ground the Lord God made various trees grow that were delightful to look at and good for food, with the tree of life in the middle of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and bad.
All right, so this is it, right? So God's going to make this garden, right? And he's going to place the man into the garden. I always image it like this, like that claw from that machine, that game where you like win the stuffed animal. Like God like picks up and is like, all right, you go over here, little guy, right? And he is going to put him in this garden, right? And in the garden, he's going to give lots of trees, right? And the Bible is going to give us 2 specific trees. Right? Names of two trees specifically. What are the names of the two trees here that the Bible just mentioned? Yeah, go ahead, James.
Tree of life and then tree of knowledge of good and bad.
Very good, right? So we have these two trees, right? So just highlight there in verse 9 the word trees, and just put this down. There's the tree of life, and there's the tree of knowledge of good and bad, good and evil. All right? There's also an unbelievable detail in the story that the trees were nice to look at, but also useful for food. I always find this remarkable. Why did God create creation to be beautiful? Why isn't it just utilitarian? Right? Why isn't it just something that's useful? Right? Why does it have to also be beautiful? Right? I remember I went to Lithuania years ago, right? And Lithuania was a country that was under the Soviet control during the Cold War and everything like that. And it was very obvious what buildings were built by the Soviets because they were ugly. They were just cement, tiny windows, and they were just meant to be useful buildings. They weren't meant to be beautiful. Right? Why is God going to not only create the trees to be good for food, but also beautiful, nice to look at? Because God knows that beauty is something that we as human beings desire. Right? And it's something that elevates our souls, right, to Him. Right? Can you define beauty? Can you define it? I don't think you can. But do you know it when you see it? Absolutely. Right? You see a sunset, you're like, that's beautiful. Right? You go up to the mountains and you see a picture of the Rocky Mountains, snow-capped at the top in the middle of summer. You're like, that's beautiful. Right? You can't define it, but you know when it's there. It's one of these things that's in the spiritual realm for human beings that we are like, we know exists, but we can't grasp it. We can't touch it, but we desire it. We want it when we see it. Right? It's meant to elevate our soul towards God, towards the good, who is the true, the good, and the beautiful. All right? So that's why we got these two trees, right? The next paragraph, don't really worry about. It's just kind of about these rivers that are going through Eden. Don't worry about it. Verse 15. All right, here we go. Let's go ahead and read from there. Any volunteers that like to read for us from verse 15? Go, James.
The Lord God then took the man and settled him in the Garden of Eden to cultivate and care for it. The Lord God gave man an order. You are free to eat from any of the trees of the garden, except the tree of knowledge of good and bad. From the tree you shall not eat. The moment you eat from it, you are surely doomed to die.
Very good, right? So I have it underlined here because you notice in the first section I was underlining the commands that God gave to His creation, right? So God here is going to take the man, put him in the garden. What's the man's job in the garden? What is he to do in the garden? He's to what, Matt? No. That's what he's not supposed to. What is he to do? His job is to what, the garden? To cultivate and to care for. Remember the other day we talked about dominion, right? To care for something, to protect it. So God gives this man a job, work, right? You see, work for the human person is fulfilling a purpose, right? As humans, we need a purpose, right? I would say that to have a job is almost like a basic human right. Everybody needs to know that they have a purpose, right? Everybody needs to know that they can go out, right, and achieve something and do something and feel useful, right? And so He gives this man his job to cultivate the garden, and then He gives him a command. What's the command? What's the command? What does God tell Adam? What does He tell him? Well, I'm working on names here. So, Isabel.
You could eat like any of the other trees except for the tree of knowledge of good and
Yes, right? You can eat from any tree, but don't eat from this one, right? I gotta be honest. I think sometimes we, as human beings, get hung up on the second part, right? The except for this one, right? Can you think about what God is saying? He's saying to Adam, hey, Adam, there's hundreds of trees. Thousands of trees. There's so many trees here in the garden. You can eat from any tree you want. Except for just this one. Like this one, just stay away from this one tree. Does that seem fair? I think that's reasonable. Right? God's like, you can do anything you want. It's freedom. Like, free food, all you want. Just don't eat anything that comes from this one tree. Right? But we as human beings, we are always like, why not? Why can't I eat from that one tree? Right? We forget the thousands of trees that we can eat from, and we focus on the one. Right? The why not. But God tells us why not. Why can't we eat from this tree? Because if you eat it, what's going to happen to you, Jonathan? You're going to die. That's pretty serious. Right? That's pretty serious. Right? Now, this is something that's remarkable. Right? Notice, one of the things we learned here is that at the beginning of the creation of the universe, right, when God creates human beings, we have what we call the preternatural gifts. One of those gifts is that we're not going to die. We were created to live forever. Right? That's fantastic. Right? I don't know what that we would have looked like. I don't know if that means I would have been my 22-year-old self, right, in peak physical condition of my life forever. Right? But now I'm getting old, my knees hurt, I can't run anymore. I don't know what that is, right? What would it be? Would it be 12? Would it be I don't know what we would have been as far as aging, but we were never gonna die. And so Adam's like, oh, interesting. Right? Where is Eve when God is giving this command to Adam? I think this is an important part, right? Where is Eve? Talia? She's not even created yet, right? And that's an important part that we should note about this story. So let's just put this note here. That God gives this command to Adam, right? To Adam, right? Not to Eve. All right? He gives this command to Adam, not to Eve. Right? She's not even created yet. Right? She's not even created yet. Right? But once again, focus on the positive here, right? That God has created this garden for the man to live in. This garden that is not only useful for food, but also beautiful to look at. The guy's got everything he needs. Almost. Right? And that's when God is going to, in verse 18, create, right, a partner. Look for someone that he could spend his life with. Right? Because we're social creatures, aren't we? If we are created in the image and likeness of God, God himself is a relationship. Right? God himself is the Father loving the Son and the Son loving the Father, and that love is so great that it forms the third person of the Holy Trinity. Right? God himself is a unity, a communion of persons. If we're created in the image and likeness, we don't like to be alone. Right? I would say this, I had a graduate I was talking to the other day, she was in college, she's having a rough time, and she said to me, I don't mind being alone, but I don't like being lonely. Isn't that so true? I don't mind being alone in my house, but I don't want to feel lonely. I don't want to feel like I got nobody. Right? And it's the same thing here with Adam. It's not bad for him to be alone, but he doesn't want him to be lonely. And so therefore, God is going to start creating. Let's go ahead and read verse 18 for us. Any volunteers that want to read verse 18? Someone hasn't read yet. Go ahead, James. Nice and loud.
The Lord God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a suitable partner for him." Okay, keep on reading.
The whole paragraph, brother.
So the Lord God formed out of the ground various wild animals and various birds of the air. And he brought them to the man to see what he would call them. Whatever the man he called for them would be his name. The man gave names to all the cattle, all the birds of the air, and all the wild animals, but none would be suitable.
Very good, right? So it says, God says that it's not good for the man to be alone, so he's going to start to create a partner, right? Trying to find a partner. What does God create? Trying to find a suitable partner, Jonathan? Animals, right? He creates all the animals, right? He's like, here's a dog, your best friend, right? Here is a cat, here's an aardvark, right? Here's an alligator, watch out for that one, right? And he brings all of these animals to the man for the man to decide what he would call them, right? Now this is important because the power to name something or someone means that you have dominion over that thing. Once again, not domination, where you are in charge and you get to squash, but dominion. Any of you guys choose your own name? No. Your parents named you, right? People always tell me, how come you spell your name that way? I'm like, I don't know. Ask my parents. They chose that, right? You didn't name yourself, right? Your parents named you, so they have dominion over you. That's it, folks. Go to Mass on Sunday. Jesus loves you, wants to see you. Have a wonderful day.